Hello students, it's Dr. Smith here. Let's get ready to go over Chapter 8 of our Working with School-Age Children textbook. This chapter we're going to be focusing on understanding and guiding children's behaviors. Ready? Let's get started. Okay, so remember, first things first, learning outcomes. What do you already know about these topics? So think about those things first. That's going to help activate your prior knowledge, activate your schema, and it will help you to remember the information moving forward. It will move that information from short-term memory into, that's right, your long-term memory. So after completing Chapter 8, you should be able to illustrate the variables that cause harmonious and mutually respectful environment within a school-age setting, identify the varying cognitive abilities used in problem solving based on children's developmental stages and their understanding of the world around them, develop behavioral strategies for exigent children so that they may have opportunities to cultivate pro-social relationships and positive personal experiences, observe the developmental stages of friendship, explore the role of teacher as facilitator and/or interventionist during decision-making processes, and finally, create a supportive classroom environment that encourages children's cognitive and social development. So once you've taken a moment to reflect on what you may already know about those learning outcomes, you are ready to dive into the chapter. All right, so here are some of the conditions affecting children's behavior. Children come from a wide variety of differing family settings. So if you think about, we're reflecting a variety of cultures, values, communication styles, and interpersonal skills. So you're going to be working with a wide variety of children. They're coming from diverse backgrounds and diversity in many different ways. The guidance system consists of the children, the environment, and the adults. So those three components, the children, the environment, and the adults. And your environment, meaning the provider in the after school or before school program, the adult in the situation, and demeanor can help to positively influence the children's behavior. And the textbook talks about how the adult role in these situations is really important because your role is to act as a leader and a mentor rather than a dictator. So think about that. Your role is to kind of facilitate, to guide, to lead, to mentor, not to dictate and not to say, it's my way or the highway, or you have to do this because I said so. So that's something important to keep in mind. The guidance system. So we're going to break it down by these different age groups. And notice the textbook uses the term guidance. We don't use the term punishment. We don't use the term discipline. It is a more respectful approach. We're looking at children as actual people who deserve respect, beings, and so it's a guidance system. We are guiding their behavior. So what does the typical developmental stage look like from a 5 to 7-year-old? So the textbook talks about how they think about problems logically, although they may still struggle with controlling their behaviors in groups. Most younger children at this age are in Kohlberg's moral stage level 1, and this is where they follow rules because they want to avoid punishment or because they want to earn a reward. I feel like a lot of adults are like that too, right? It shifts from kindness to, the shift is from kindergartners, depending on adults, to second or third graders, who develop more tight, close-knit friendships with their peers. And you're also at this age going to get more what we call tattletaling. So an 8 to 10-year-olds are developing more strength physically, so they have more endurance. Also, they are at level 2 of Kohlberg's moral reasoning levels. They can develop their own games with complex rules, and they hold each other to compliance. So whatever rules they make up, they're going to hold their peers to it. Those were the rules we said, you said. Children 9 and older can see things from others' point of view, so they're developing more empathy. 10-year-olds need things to be fair, and 8 to 10-year-olds still have fears like snakes, spiders, heights, and large bodies of water. And again, I can think of many adults, including myself, that have many of those same fears. So I don't think it's just the 8 to 10-year-olds. Okay, moving on to 11 and 12-year-olds. Children over age 10 can give inexperienced after-school care workers a run for their money. And why is that? Because they may test program rules and they may test authority. Some 12-year-olds may think that it's cool to swear, so using profanity, or talk back to adults because they think it's cool or they like the way that it feels to, to reject authority. At this age, friendships are very important, and sometimes children at this age will determine that the ends justify the means. So whatever the outcome is, if the outcome is desirable, then even if the way to get to that outcome is not ideal, it's not right, children at this stage may still say, well, the end justifies the means. Okay, so 13 to 16-year-olds. Teens often are happier in school than they were in previous years, but it's not for the reason you might think. It's not because they love learning. It's because of the social aspect, because of the friendships, because they love being around their peers. They're typically in stages 4 or 5 of Kohlberg's moral development. There's a willingness to meet agreed upon obligations. So this sense of kind of integrity or holding to what they said they were going to do with their friends. 14-year-old girls are more interested in boys their age than the boys are interested in them. But when age 16 comes, then usually it's reciprocated. So it's more mutual in terms of, typical girls liking typical boys. Now we know that there's a spectrum of gender and gender identity and sexuality, but just thinking of, in general, this is what the textbook says about girls and boys and their affinity towards each other. Peer pressure at this stage, peer pressure can be too great. And kids at this age may feel that they don't need after-school supervision. But according to the textbook, the reality is they still do. And again, the importance of friendships is huge. Friendship is everything. So we know, because we were all this age before, and we can remember how important our friendships were, and the opinions of our friends were even more important than those of our family members oftentimes. So the environment is also a very important part of the guidance system, and definitely the adults in the system. It all works together, kind of a beautiful trifecta. So here are some theories behind child guidance techniques. So effective child guidance techniques: stating expectations of desired behaviors. For example, we might say something like, in this program, we are considerate of one another, instead of don't hit. Or, while we are inside, let's keep our voices quieter, instead of stop yelling. So you see the difference. It's more of a positive declaration of what the expectations are, rather than what you don't want them to do. Also, it's recommended to clearly label things in the environment around the classroom. Post schedules if there are specific times that you want things to be done, but make sure that the rules or whatever schedules are reviewed by the staff before you are posting. Okay, so also I wanted to point out for problem solving, Figure 8.3 is a great resource, so I'm going to turn to that. Okay, so it's on page 179 of the textbook. So this chart right here. Okay. Figure 8.3, steps to problem solving. Step 1, decide who owns the problem. Step 2, define the problem. I can't concentrate when Susan plays the keyboard. Step 3, generate possible solutions. Susan uses the earphones. I find another place to work. I wear earplugs. So finding a solution. Don't just come to me with the problems. Let's work together to figure out feasible solutions. Step 4, evaluate and test the various solutions. Step 5, Decide on a mutually acceptable solution. This depends on both Susan's willingness to compromise and Jorge's persuasive skills. And then finally implement the solution. So it's nice to have a very clear, concrete structure that you can go through with students to help problem solving. Now with conflict resolution, the textbook talks a lot about peer mediation and empowering students to solve problems on their own. We don't want to take away their power by always trying to solve the problems for them, because then it tells them that they need us in order to solve their problems. What are they going to do when they're outside of the after-school program? So we want to empower them and explicitly teach them conflict resolution skills. Okay, reinforcing, rewarding, and punishing. Reinforcer. A reinforcer is anything that causes a behavior to be repeated. So that can be anything like a smile, cookies. So sometimes we reinforce negative behavior by giving it attention. So it's also important that we think about, we can ignore benign behavior. So benign would be something that's not going to cause harm or hurt anyone. We can ignore benign inappropriate behavior, and that can hopefully extinguish it. So think about if the behavior is something that you feel is subtle, or maybe it's attention seeking. If you ignore it, then it can possibly go away because the child is not experiencing that reinforcer. Cognitive modification has a few different steps. Step 1, arouse the child's empathy. Step 2, help them alter their self-perception. And step 3, focus on their own values and actions. All right, and then natural and logical consequences. These are great to be familiar with. So a natural consequence would be something like, if my child forgets their lunch at school, the logical consequence is that they're not going to be able to eat lunch, and they're going to be hungry when they get home from school or when they go to the after-school program. Another example might be they forget their jacket. Natural consequence. So adult does not intervene. It just happens naturally. A natural consequence to not having your jacket would be wet. You might be cold, right? A logical consequence is something that is directly related to the behavior, and that is led by an adult. So an example might be, if you make a mess, then you are going to be required to clean up that mess. Now, the book talks about how we have to make sure that basically the punishment fits the crime. I don't mean punishment literally, because we're saying it's guidance, but that's just a saying that I think people are familiar with. So if a child makes a mess at their station, we ask them to clean up the station. We're not going to say go clean up the bathrooms or clean up the whole classroom, right? The logical consequence is you clean up a mess, you clean up that same mess. Another example given in the textbook is a child is dawdling for 20 minutes and didn't put away their game. So when it's time to go outside, that child does not get to go outside yet because they have to stay back in and clean up their mess. Okay, so differences between natural consequences and logical consequences. And also involving parents in all of this guidance is really important, because you want to communicate with parents what are some of the conflict strategies that you're using. You want to make sure that you're on the same page. It's called a shared responsibility for behavior management. So making sure that you're communicating with parents regularly if possible, and ensuring that you feel like you are a team. And then we're back to the beginning. So we're back to our learning outcomes. So think about what you might have learned about these different objectives and what you might be able to add and elaborate. And your schema has now transformed. And so you have new knowledge that you are integrating with your previous existing knowledge. And hopefully by thinking of connections and elaborating on these different concepts and thinking about real life examples, you will move this information from your short-term memory into your long-term memory, and it will be there when you need it later on in life and working with children. Thank you.